Hi, my name is Aldo Billingslea, and I'm playing the role of Ira Aldridge in Red Velvet. I wanted to do Red Velvet when I read about the script, that there was an actual script about Ira Aldridge. I first encountered Ira Aldridge when I was looking at a book on black Shakespeareans and these famous black actors who had played some famous roles in Shakespeare. And there was this man who in the 19th century had performed in the United States a little bit, but then went to Europe and became much, much more successful in just the same light that Paul Robeson did and Josephine Baker, those sorts of people. So reading about that really made me want to know more about him, incorporated him into a class I was teaching, and then I heard about this script and thought, oh, I really, really want that. What surprised me about the play was the initial response to Ira in London. I had read about some of his successes as he went around the English countryside, and then in Eastern Europe becoming really, really popular, really huge. So I thought that just wherever he went, people were just wowed, and he was welcomed with open arms, and there wasn't much of in the way of discrimination that he would have to face because of his race. And I was mistaken once I started reading this play and looking at the research about the reviews that he received and the initial acclaim versus the initial assault on his person for daring to be black and performing roles written by William Shakespeare. I was a little surprised. Fortunately, the playwright, Lolita Chakrabarty, lets us know that the people who owned the theater were also the people who owned the press, and they were the ones who were somewhat offended by the assumption that this American and this black man would dare to speak these roles and say these words, while the audience received it much more favorably. Some of the elite in London who didn't want change and wanted to just maintain their status quo, they tried to put a stop to it, to an extent did for a while, and then his success came later in England. I'm smiling because the answer is yes. There is a bit of pressure when you're doing an historical figure. When you're doing any role, you want to honor the role and the writer and the story. When you're doing a historic role and it's one of those iconic figures, and for those who study theater and study American theater from this black perspective, he's a hero that is able to break ground, be a real trailblazer for us. So yes, then there's a bigger obligation to try to do him justice, to try to get it right. What that means is not necessarily try to establish a following for Saint Ira, because that's not the case. He's not a saint. There are faults and there are foibles, but you also want to get the accomplishments right so that people will leave the theater saying, I had no idea, I want to learn more, I have now this thirst about this person, I want to find more information out about him. Then you're doing your job. And in order to do that, and to do it well, not to make him mockable or to make him two-dimensional, takes a bit of work. And it's a wonderful obligation to have, but it is a little bit more of an obligation. In this play, fortunately, our playwright, Lolita Chakrabarty, didn't leave him as the only black person on stage. There's a great foil to him in the role of Connie, and we get to watch how those two relate. This person who comes in with some high status of playing the title role in this play in one of the most impressive theaters in London, and this woman Connie, who's the servant who's serving everyone tea and not always treated well. We get to watch that low status person and this high status person, who are both black, interact with these white people and interact with each other, and that's important. So I'm grateful that he's not the only person who's black in the play, but as that high status person, I want to tell that story right so that people respect it and can still be moved by it. There's a lot of our present day consciousness that comes into the play, and then you have to work as a cast and with your director, and fortunately in this case we have an extraordinary dramaturg who's also working with us to make sure that you're telling the play that needs to be told and not forcing your modern mores onto the script, but being aware of them and how they play. So trying to do enough research to figure out what's happening in that world in the 19th century, keep enough awareness about what's happening in our 21st century world to understand how some of these things may play, how some choices might be authentic, but not helpful if it makes the audience go, oh my God, and pull back, and they're not able to really feel anything for the characters because they're so affronted by the authenticity of that world. That's not so great. It's a lot like a dialect. If you do a dialect, sometimes it's authentic, that's absolutely authentic. People can say, that is an absolute Cockney accent, that's terrific. I can't understand a word you're saying, but it's an authentic accent. Sometimes you have to adjust it on stage, and we have to do that with some of the choices that we make because of our own consciousness, and so we can be aware of things on a racial, an ethnic, or a gender level, but we also need to make sure that it works for this play in this time.